You feel it, don't you? That quiet ache that doesn't quite go away. The way you carry your days like they're heavier than they should be. You smile, you work, you show up. But somewhere underneath it all, something inside you is shifting. Maybe you can't explain it. Maybe you've tried. But it feels like the life you built is no longer fitting the person you're becoming. If any part of that feels too close, too raw, stay with me. This isn't just a video. This might be a mirror, and not the kind that shows your face, the kind that shows your soul. Because today, we're talking about something that doesn't show up on your calendar and won't be diagnosed in a therapist's office. We're talking about the quiet, unseen, undeniable signs that you're awakening spiritually. You're not just changing, you're remembering. You're not just tired, you're shedding. You're not just lost, you're being pulled back to the truth of who you are and who you've always been. But here's the thing, a spiritual awakening isn't always gentle. Sometimes it breaks you open in places you thought were healed. It brings people into your life and then takes them away. It asks for silence in a world that worships noise. And it doesn't come with instructions, only invitations. What we're about to dive into isn't a checklist. It's a story, maybe your story. And as we walk through these 5 signs wrapped in emotion, memory, and meaning, I want you to listen not just with your ears, but with that tender part of you that's been waiting for someone to finally speak your language. So if you've been feeling things you can't explain, dreaming about things you've forgotten, or craving a life that feels more like you, this might be why. Let's go deeper. And if something in this resonates, if it reaches a part of you that feels hidden or unseen, I invite you to pause, breathe, and maybe even subscribe. Because around here we don't do noise, we do soul. The first sign shows up quietly, almost like a whisper. It happens when you're surrounded by people who love you, and yet you feel alone. Not lonely exactly, but disconnected. Like you're sitting at the dinner table and watching your own life from the outside. You're nodding, laughing at the right moments, showing up like you always have, but something's missing. It's not about the people. You care about them. You always have. But suddenly, the conversations feel shallow. The places that once gave you comfort, the parties, the routines, the expectations now feel like you're playing a part in a play you never auditioned for. This is the moment many people mistake for depression. And maybe that's what someone told you it was. But it's deeper than that. You're not withdrawing. You're being drawn back inward. See, when a soul begins to awaken, it starts to crave depth. And not the kind that can be found scrolling late at night or endlessly pleasing others. It wants truth, stillness. It wants to hear its own voice again, the one that got buried beneath years of shoulds and musts. You begin to notice things differently. The way a leaf moves in the wind, the silence between words, the way your chest tightens when you betray yourself just to keep the peace. Suddenly, you can't pretend anymore. Pretending hurts more than telling the truth. And so you start to pull away, not because you don't love others, but because you're finally learning how to love you. But this stage is painful, isn't it? Because when you stop performing, people notice. When you stop agreeing, stop overgiving, stop nodding to keep the balance, people start asking, what's wrong with you? Or you've changed. And maybe you have. Or maybe you're finally becoming honest. You start to feel torn between the life that used to work and the life that's trying to be born. And that space in between, it's where the ache lives, where the nights feel longer, where you question if you're doing something wrong just because you feel everything more intensely now. But no, you're not broken. You're being broken open. There is nothing wrong with you. In fact, this might be the first time something deeply right is finally happening. You're not losing connection. You're being called to deeper ones. You're not losing people. You're being realigned with truth. You're not isolating. You're incubating. And when you've lived your entire life trying to be enough for everyone else, the first sign of awakening can feel like a loss. But it's not. It's the beginning of return. A remembering of your own soul's rhythm. A call to pause, breathe, and listen again. So if you're here, in this space, unsure of who you are, no longer who you were, not yet who you're becoming, hold on. The discomfort is sacred. The emptiness is not a void, it's a clearing. For something more honest, something more whole. You're not fading. You're finally arriving. And then, without warning, The second sign creeps in subtle but undeniable. It shows up in the middle of a conversation, when someone says something unkind, and for the first time, you don't take the bait. You don't shrink. You don't over-explain. You just notice. It lands, but it doesn't stay. You feel it, but you don't carry it. There's a space now between what happens to you and how you react, a sacred pause. And in that pause, something new is born. It's not numbness. It's clarity. You're no longer desperate to be understood by those who misunderstand you. You're no longer willing to abandon your peace just to prove a point. And you're starting to understand something you once feared. Not everything needs your energy. There was a time not long ago when your worth was tied to how useful, agreeable, or available you were. You would twist yourself into quiet shapes just to avoid tension. You would give beyond your limits, hoping someone would finally see how good your heart was. You believed that being loved meant being needed, but now you're starting to unlearn that survival. You no longer want to be praised for being selfless. You want to be whole. You no longer want to be chosen out of convenience. You want to be met in truth. And yes, there's grief in this shift, because the old version of you, the one who stayed silent to keep things calm, the one who smiled while secretly aching, the one who kept giving second chances, that version kept you safe. But you're not here just to be safe anymore. You're here to be true. So you begin to listen more to your inner voice, the one you used to silence. You start saying no, even when your hands tremble. You honor your exhaustion. You stop forcing conversations. You no longer justify your softness or apologize for your strength. And perhaps the most profound part? You begin to see others differently too. You don't hate them for hurting you. You see their pain, their patterns, their wounds. You stop trying to change them. Instead, you change your proximity. This is not detachment. It's compassion with boundaries, love with discernment. You understand now that not everyone will walk with you where you're going. Some people were chapters, some were mirrors, some were lessons written in fire, but you are still becoming. And with every decision that honors your truth, with every moment you choose presence over performance, peace over people-pleasing, alignment over attachment, you rise quietly, powerfully, authentically. So if you've noticed yourself letting go not out of bitterness, but out of reverence for your own energy, trust that you're not cold, you're healing. You're not distant, you're protecting your light. You're not too much. You're just finally refusing to be less. And that is a sacred sign. Then it happens, the third sign. It doesn't crash into you like a revelation. It comes slowly, like sunlight inching across a wall, gentle, patient, undeniable. You start questioning everything, not in a dramatic, burn your life down kind of way, but in a quiet, persistent ache that whispers, is this really mine? You look at your job and wonder who you were when you said yes to it. You stare at your closet and realize half the clothes don't feel like you anymore. You scroll through your phone and feel a strange distance from the people you once called every day. The music you used to love doesn't land the same. Even your goals, the ones you worked so hard for, now feel like they belong to someone else. And maybe they do. Because when you begin to awaken, your identity starts to unravel. The roles, the rules, the versions of you that were built to survive, they begin to fall away. It's terrifying because for so long, you were so sure. You had answers. You had a plan. You had a mask that worked. You were the funny one, the strong one, the responsible one, the fixer, the achiever, the silent sufferer. And now those masks feel heavy. You catch yourself in moments of silence staring off. Not because you're lost, but because you're beginning to remember that there's more. More than this image, more than this path, more than what you've been taught to want. You don't want perfect anymore. You want real. You want to wake up and not feel like you're performing your life. You want to be able to cry and not feel like you're failing. You want to sit in a room and feel seen, not just admired. But this questioning, it's lonely, because the world loves certainty. It rewards clarity. It praises the ones who have it all together. But what no one talks about is how sacred it is to fall apart, how holy it is to unbecome everything you thought you had to be. So you begin to make space. You say no more often. You stop rushing to fill the silence. You let go of plans that feel forced. You don't respond right away. You pause. You breathe. You let the questions hang in the air like sacred incense. Who am I beneath the expectations? What would I choose if I wasn't afraid? What is the life that wants to be lived through me? And no, the answers don't always come. Not right away. Sometimes not for years. But here's what does come: a sense of honesty. A willingness to stand in the unknown. A quiet reverence for your own becoming. You realize you're not here to figure it all out. You're here to feel it all in. You're not here to be right. You're here to be whole. So if you're standing at the edge of a life that no longer fits, staring into the fog of what's next, don't turn back. The questions are not the end. They are the beginning. They are the doorway into a life you don't have to fake your way through. They are the proof that your soul is awakening. They are the permission to begin again, this time in truth. And then, without meaning to, you begin to notice the fourth sign. It feels like softness, but not the kind you were taught. Not politeness, not being nice, not tolerating what hurts you in the name of being kind. No, this softness is something else entirely. It's the moment you stop punishing yourself for needing rest. The moment you realize your sensitivity was never a weakness, it was wisdom. The moment you finally hold your own hand when the world feels too loud. You've spent years being strong, carrying others, smiling through pain, forgiving things too soon, laughing in rooms where your voice wasn't truly welcome. But now you're learning how to come home to yourself. You start waking up earlier, not because you should, but because the silence in the morning feels like a balm. You find yourself crying more often, not from sadness, but from the sheer relief of feeling again. You sit in the sun, you touch your own heart. You look in the mirror with a little more grace, and maybe no one notices. Maybe the world still sees you as composed, capable, calm, but you know what's happening beneath the surface. You're learning how to soothe yourself, how to mother yourself, how to hold space for your own becoming without rushing it. You don't need to be impressive anymore. You just want to be honest. There's a moment it might happen while you're driving, or walking alone, or sitting on your bed surrounded by silence, where you realize you're proud of yourself. Not for the things you've achieved, not for the boxes you've checked, but for how deeply you've stayed, how gently you've chosen to heal, how bravely you've kept your heart open even when it cracked. And suddenly, your definition of strength changes. It's no longer about how much you can carry. It's about how little you're willing to betray yourself. You no longer chase validation. You sit in self-respect. You no longer beg for reciprocity. You embody it. You no longer ignore the ache. You tend to it. And in this softness, you begin to notice something wild and beautiful. You're not breaking down, you're blooming. Not all flowers bloom in spring. Some bloom in the ruins. Some bloom in the silence after the storm. Some bloom when you finally stop running from the parts of you that hurt. And isn't that what you're doing? You're turning inward, listening closely, speaking kindly to the child inside who never got to rest. You're no longer at war with yourself. You're remembering how to love her, love him, love you, not because you're perfect, but because you're still here, still trying, still healing. And that softness, that tender, quiet strength, that's the fourth sign, and it's breathtaking. Then comes the fifth sign, the one that hums through your body like a secret you've always known but only now remember. It's the shift from fear to trust, not because everything is suddenly certain, not because life got easier, but because something inside you finally surrendered to the truth. You are not lost. You are being led. There's a moment, and maybe you've had it, when you look back at all the times you thought it was over, all the nights you cried into your pillow, all the times you begged for answers, and you see that you were never alone. Even in the chaos, even in the silence, even in the heartbreak, somehow grace found you. And now, you begin to notice synchronicities. You think of someone, and they call. You're struggling with a decision, and a stranger says something that feels meant just for you. You're questioning everything, and a page in a book stops you in your tracks. These aren't accidents. You've entered the rhythm of something deeper, where life doesn't shout, but whispers, where guidance isn't forced but felt, and it changes everything. You stop clinging. You stop chasing. You stop trying to control what was never yours to hold. You still feel fear, of course, but you no longer let it lead. Instead, you follow peace. You start asking different questions. Not, how can I make them stay? But, does this feel aligned with who I'm becoming? Not, what if I fail? But what would I choose if I trusted life to catch me? Not, am I doing enough? But am I being true? And slowly, the pressure lifts. You realize you don't have to hustle your way into worthiness. You don't have to explain your soul to those committed to misunderstanding you. You don't have to live a life that impresses others and empties you. You just have to follow what feels honest, what feels alive, what feels like peace in your body, not tension in your chest. There's a kind of beauty that blooms when you stop fighting life and start dancing with it. You wake up and trust the timing. You rest and trust the unfolding. You release people and trust that what's meant will never require you to abandon yourself to keep it. You begin to live from the inside out. And that's what this sign is all about. Not blind faith, not spiritual bypassing, but sacred trust. Trust that your pain wasn't pointless. Trust that your path is not a mistake. Trust that your soul knew what it came here to learn. And yes, some days you will still forget. You'll spiral. You'll want to go back to the familiar, to the easy, to the versions of you that used to feel safer, but something inside you won't let you. Because once you begin to wake up, you can't go back to sleep. You've seen too much, felt too much, grown too much. And though the road ahead is unknown, you finally feel ready to walk it, not because you know where it ends, but because you're no longer afraid to find out. So here you are, at the edge of who you were, and the quiet beginning of who you're becoming. Not everyone will see it. Most won't understand it. Because awakening isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with fireworks or applause. It happens in the stillness, in the pause between who you used to be and who you no longer pretend to be. And even now, after everything, there's still this voice, isn't there? The one that asks, am I really healing or just surviving again? The truth is maybe both, because healing isn't a straight line. It's messy, uneven, sacredly unpredictable. Some days you'll feel free, whole, luminous. Other days you'll forget everything you know and crawl back into old patterns like they're home, but they're not home anymore. And deep down, you know it. The beautiful thing is you no longer punish yourself for it. You see the spiral, you catch the trigger, you pause in the pattern. And that pause, that one breath of awareness is everything. That's what awakening gives you. The space to choose again. You begin to find peace in simplicity. You no longer need the noise, the validation, the endless striving. You make peace with your past, not because it didn't hurt, but because it made you honest. You no longer rush to get to the next version of yourself. You realize you were never meant to be perfect. You were meant to be present. And maybe now, as you're listening, there's something rising in your chest, a quiet knowing, a softness, a breath you didn't know you were holding, finally letting go. That's you returning to the body you tried to escape, the heart you silenced, the dreams you buried, the truth you once feared. And as you return, the world begins to look different. Not because it's changed, but because you have. You see beauty in things you used to overlook. You speak gently to parts of you you once rejected. You stop seeking homes in others and begin building one inside yourself. And if you've made it this far, if your heart is beating a little slower, your breath a little deeper, if your eyes sting with that feeling you can't quite name, then maybe this wasn't just a story. Maybe it was a remembering of what you are, of where you're going, of why you never really lost your way. You were just being guided by something your mind couldn't explain. So thank you for staying, for feeling, for not turning away when it got tender. The fact that you're still here, still searching, still listening, means your soul is very much alive. If this spoke to you, even in the smallest way, if it echoed through a part of you that's been quietly waiting to be seen, then maybe, just maybe, this is your sign to keep going. You're not alone, you're not behind, you're not broken, you're becoming. And I'll meet you right there in the in-between. If this brought you even an inch closer to yourself, take a moment to breathe. And if it feels right, share it. Let it ripple. Let it reach someone else who's been holding their breath. Subscribe if you'd like to walk this path together. But more than anything, stay close to you. That's the real awakening.